let's start again. Good morning. There you go, we're all there. Well, welcome back to St Mark's for the second of our mini-series on teaching and learning on the transforming love of God. Don't worry if you weren't here last week, I will do a bit of a recap. And if you were here last week, equally don't worry, I'm not going to collect any homework in. But hopefully those, oh dear, hopefully those handouts that you took and some of those suggestions will have been helpful during the course of the week. Wasn't it great this morning to hear the bell? Isn't it lovely? It's fab. It is that call for worship, and actually as a centre of a community, isn't it lovely to be able to tell the world that we're meeting to share in God's love together. So thank you to all those people who have made that possible, and Ian's strong arm. I saw him kind of fading a bit towards the end there, so you're okay. I'll give you a massage afterwards. So my name's Chris, and I'm part of the ministry team here at St Mark's, and as I shared last week, I'm also a reader, and in fact was re-licensed this week, which means I'm either doing something right or I'm keeping my head sufficiently below the parapet to be shot off. And I said last week that I wear this not as a sign of any hierarchy or that I'm any more sorted than anyone else, but as a message to myself that even someone as clumsy and as imperfect as me can be used to share God's love if I choose to. Oh, got a bit of music. So everything that you need will be on the screens. And whilst we clearly remain observant of the rules, there will be points in time where I'll offer you to stand. So at the start of our time this morning together, let's just pause. Some of you from last week's handouts might be familiar with the short prayer, an intentional decluttering of our minds. So I offer you now just to be still and to pause. Close your eyes maybe and become aware of God's presence. A sense of peace as you notice your breathing may be gradually slow as you relax and become more aware of the sounds around you. The simplicity of the instruments creating the music. Heavenly Father, you created me to be a human being, not a human doing. You created me to love me. Help me now in this space to know what it is to be deeply loved by you, and to love you with all my heart, soul and mind. If those distractions still remain in your mind, just take them and place them in an imaginary box or put them on a shelf. It can be picked up later, but now I just want to be still and fully present with God. So come, Holy Spirit, we welcome you to this place. Fill us fresh this morning. Amen. Amen. So, last week, as part of the preamble to this mini-series of sharing and learning together, I reminded you of the Bishop's encouragement to use this time as we emerge from what's been quite challenging times for each of us, as almost as a sabbatical, a time to pause and reflect. I said that it was my intention during our brief time together on a Sunday for us to create that space where you can more fully engage in that learning and sharing in the week to come. That you might become curious, that you might be open to God to shape you. I love that imagery of the potter's wheel, taking that lump of clay and with great care and attention, the potter forms and shapes something that is beautiful. Isaiah 64 verse 8. But now, O Lord, you are our Father. We are the clay and you are the potter. We are the work of your hands. So as we listen to some music now, I wonder if you can truly echo the words. Will you give your life, maybe afresh, maybe for the first time, to that potter's hand to mould you? So, last week we looked together at some of the perspectives of love, and we acknowledged that we've become a bit clumsy in our use of the word love. We've lost maybe some of that depth of that agape love, God's overwhelming love. We opened up something about our own different expressions of love, and we looked at love languages as a means to just become curious about how we accept and receive love. And I wonder, those who did that little questionnaire, whether you learned a little bit about yourself or maybe a friend or someone who's close to you. And we did that for one simple reason, just to ponder the question, do I deeply, deeply know God's transforming love for me? So this week, again with that same approach of opening up questions and encouraging us to become curious, we're going to consider things that might prevent us from knowing that love, that transforming love that God has for each and every one of us. You may recall at the beginning of last week I posed a question that had been on my mind as I'd been praying and thinking about this mini-series. And the question was whether or not God loved whether God loved Saul of Tarsus before he became Paul, before that road to Damascus experience. So we're going to have a look at that in a moment. But I want to unpack and look a little bit more closely at this chap Saul. I think there's a lot in there that I feel will help us to maybe explore and discover some of those barriers that we may put in the way of truly knowing God's transforming love. And then I'm also going to show you and offer you a lifeline of a person who has had highs and lows through their life. Questions that have remained unanswered, challenges that for that person has got in the way of deeply knowing God's love. But let's start with some scripture and a little of who this person Saul was. I've got 3 extracts from Acts. I'm going to rattle through them quite quickly. My intention is just to give you some snapshots, some resumes, some kind of insights into who this person Saul was. So the first reading, Acts 7, is on the screen. Apologies if it's a little bit slow, and apologies if I rush a little bit through it. So Acts 7, when the members of the Sanhedrin heard this, they were furious and gnashed their teeth at him. But Stephen, full of the Holy Spirit, looked up to heaven and saw the glory of God, and Jesus standing at the right hand of God. Look, he said, I see heaven open and the Son of Man standing at the right hand of God. At this they covered their ears, and yelling at the top of their voices, they all rushed at him, dragging him out of the city and began to stone him. Meanwhile, the witnesses laid their coats at the feet of a young man named Saul. Acts 8. On that day, a great persecution broke out against the church in Jerusalem, and all except the apostles were scattered throughout Judea and Samaria. Godly men buried Stephen and mourned deeply for him, but Saul began to destroy the church. Going from house to house, he dragged off both men and women and put them in prison. And finally, Acts 9. Meanwhile, Saul was still breathing out murderous threats against the Lord's disciples. He went to the high priest and asked him for letters to the synagogues in Damascus, so that if they found anyone there belonging to the way, whether men or women, he might take them as prisoners to Jerusalem. You see, Saul was a God-fearing man, clear in his own mind that he was following the laws and the rules, often man-made, and was passionate about ensuring people following those rules, and that they followed those rules. And that these Christians needed to be cleansed, they needed to be made an example of, and if necessary, they needed to be killed. Saul would say, I suspect, that he was following God's instructions. And I wonder how much I follow God's instructions, but actually they're merely my views or principles, my rights or wrongs dressed up. Maybe conforming to the laws that bind us rather than set us free by that new covenant through Jesus Christ. I selected a few verses almost to paint a bit of a resume of Saul, paint a picture which, had you not known Paul, you might well form a view quite quickly that this Saul wasn't a very nice chap. I'm keen for us to just delve a little bit more into this person, Saul, and so there's a short clip which might paint a little bit more of a picture of who this man Saul was.
Underneath the streets of modern-day Jerusalem, surrounded by ruins of the city of Jerusalem that date back to the Roman era. Now, the context of the early church is the Roman Empire, and the story of the early church wouldn't be complete without a close examination of a Jewish man who happens to be a Roman citizen named Saul. Now, we learn from Luke's account that Saul was born in the city of Tarsus, a city of immense importance in the first century. It was known as one of the great learning centers of the ancient world, alongside Alexandria in Egypt and Athens in Greece. Although Tarsus was quite Hellenistic, that is, culturally Greek, and even pagan in many ways, there was a large community of Jews there. Scripture tells us that Saul's family had somehow acquired its Roman citizenship, so Saul was born a Roman citizen himself. He was a Jew, but unlike most of the Jews in Judea, he had all the benefits of Roman citizenship. As a child, Saul was sent here to Jerusalem for his formal education. According to Scripture, he was actually trained under the renowned man named Gamaliel. Now, in a previous episode, we learned that Gamaliel saved the lives of the apostles from certain death at the hands of a furious religious council. After his education in Jerusalem, Saul returned to Tarsus, where he would have been trained in Greek philosophy and literature. He would have also learned Hellenistic and Roman subjects. At some point, Saul also began learning his trade, tent making. This was big business in Tarsus, since the region was well known for a type of felt cloth from the wool of shaggy black goats that is still used today. In short, Saul was wise in the ways of the world and his Israelite heritage. He was well connected in the Roman machinery of Tarsus and the religious establishment of Jerusalem.
Wise in the ways of the world. Well, Mike. As I said earlier, I know that I can associate with Saul, maybe not to the point of killing people, but at times I know that I can stick fiercely to my principles and not show love, not show God's love, following rules that don't show God's love and mercy and grace, but that potentially result in oppression, in abuse, in anger and hatred. In some way, I know deep down that I could well have been that person Saul. But there's hope that transforming love of God is ever present, and as Saul prepares to go to Damascus, death warrants in hand, he encounters God, and bang. But let's be clear, we don't all encounter God for the first time as a road to Damascus experience, and that's okay. We don't need to consider ourselves second-class Christians. We all experience that love, that transforming love, in different ways. So before we come back to that question about whether God loved Saul, I want to point something out that I think is quite key in the story that we've just heard. You might want to grab your Bible or your phone and turn to Acts 9. I'm just going to play through the words of a voice that might sound a bit familiar. And I want you to listen out in this short extract from Acts 9 to the words, "Now get up and go to the city, and you'll be told what to do."
Acts chapter 9. Meanwhile, Saul was still breathing out murderous threats against the Lord's disciples. He went to the high priest and asked him for letters to the synagogues in Damascus, so that if he found any there who belonged to the way, whether men or women, he might take them as prisoners to Jerusalem. As he neared Damascus on his journey, suddenly a light from heaven flashed around him. He fell to the ground and heard a voice say to him, "Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me?" "Who are you, Lord?" Saul asked. "I am Jesus, whom you are persecuting. Now get up and go into the city, and you will be told what you must do."
Now get up, go to the city, and you will be told what to do. I wonder if I would be standing here now amongst brothers and sisters in Christ if Saul had decided not to, whether he just turned back and carried on his Saul-like ways. And I wonder whether a barrier for us in knowing God's transforming love is that we experience that transforming love, but then we sit back and do nothing, rather than respond to a calling or an instruction, maybe through fear of the unknown, maybe through fear of looking different, of standing out. So to the question, did God love Saul? I did a range of searches on the internet, and I listened to a number of talks in which people were quoting scripture about how God hated Saul. And taken literally, if you look at Proverbs and things like Psalm 11, where it says the Lord tests the righteous, but his soul hates the wicked, you might conclude that. But despite all of what was articulately presented in these talks, for my part, I have no doubt that God loved Saul. How could he not love him in that agape love, that overwhelming transformational love? Someone that he fearfully and wonderfully made. Someone he made in his own image. Did he love his actions? I suggest not. Did he mourn for the straying of this lost lamb? Of course he did. And did he go out to find him? Absolutely, and we've just heard how Saul responded with a resounding, "Yes, here I am, Lord. Take me back to that lump of clay and remake me with those potter's hands." So what prevents us from knowing that transforming love of God? I wonder, if we held the mirror up, would we see something of Saul, wise in the ways of the world? I wonder if we might dare to say that prayer, "Here I am, Lord, take me, remould me," and then pick yourself up, dust yourself off from that dusty road and head to the city, wherever that city may take you. Let's just pause for a moment and get some blood circulating. I'd like to offer, if you're able to stand, if not, then please remain seated. One of the things that I've missed, and I'm really looking forward to having back, no, feel free to stand, get yourself kind of a bit of, one of the things I've really missed, and I'm definitely looking forward to having back, is when we shared the peace together. Now, clearly in our current restrictions, it's not possible to do that, but if you slowly turn towards people in and around you, and so you can catch their eyes, I suggest that whilst this isn't the peace, it would be something by way of showing that love. I want to just offer you some words, and please make these your words if you feel free, as you look and gaze upon people close or far away. So Father God, as I stand or sit here now, draw my eyes to those from whom I've missed that warm embrace. Let me show them my love and care through eyes that may be tired or weary, but that connect into my very being. Help me to simply be a channel of your transforming love to the person I'm looking at right now. And as the poem Helen read last week said, he simply looked into my eyes and through all my fear and hurt said, "My child, how good to be with you." So please feel free to be seated. If there's one thing that we've tried to do, is trying to be creative amongst our restrictions, and maybe there's something in that, in sharing a piece just through our eyes, that we might want to try again at some point. So before we look at a lifeline to unpack a little bit more of what I think gets in the way, let's hear a rousing song, a rousing hymn that's introduced by somebody that might well be familiar to you, our very own Canon Kate. So here is Love, Vast as the Ocean. Enjoy.
It's really difficult to pick a favourite hymn, but one of my absolute favourites is Here Is Love. I was taught it in school choir at junior school, and I was taught it in Welsh as well, and I can still sing it in Welsh on a good day. And the reason that I love it is because it speaks of God's love for his creation shown through Jesus Christ.
That's another one of the things that I've absolutely missed, and that I can't wait to have back. That heartfelt, robust singing that we can all do together and raise the roof. So we've had a little look about this person's soul and pondered whether there are possibly things that are similar with his journey. And it helped me to begin to think about my own journey. You see, as much as I know some of you a bit, some of you a bit more than a bit, and some of you quite well, I'm not sure I could stand here and be representative of the views of what gets in our way of knowing God's transforming love. However, if I look back over my journey, I suggest that there may be things that have got in my way that you might well have found too. Maybe some things more than others. So I simply offer you 50 years in 5 minutes. This is my lifeline. It might take you a few moments to work it out. It's taken me 50 years to work it out, but Effectively, what it's doing from left to right is a timeline, starting at 1971. Yes, I know I only look 25, but the blue line is my sense or awareness of God's love for me at points at the top and at points at the bottom where I had that sense, where the sense was very low. The red line is my life journey, indicated as a general happiness. And again, high is good and low is unhappy. It's basic, but hopefully it'll be enough for me to just unpack a few points this morning. So I want to pick up on 4 points that are shown on that diagram. The cross indicates the point at which, at the top there, at Boys Brigade Camp in 1984 on the Isle of Wight, I made a commitment to be a Christian. I said that believer's prayer and suddenly I was invincible. There was no flashing lights, an angel didn't appear, and I didn't suddenly lose my sight like Saul. But there was a deep sense of something being a bit different. This brings me to point 1. I didn't move very far from that first base. 1 Corinthians 3, I gave you milk, not solids, as you weren't ready for it, and you still aren't, you are still worldly. I was a very worldly teenager. My journey with Christ remained largely superficial, and that prevented me from knowing, deeply knowing, that transforming love of God. I drifted and I had no real desire to learn more. I wonder if a barrier to us knowing God's transforming love is because we're still happy on milk, that we don't dig deeper into our journey with God. Notice that that red line remained high during this time, i.e. my lack of knowing God's transforming love didn't seem to impact my general happiness, maybe my worldly happiness. I married Helen in 1997, and shortly afterwards we went travelling for 6 months and spent the millennium in New Zealand. Then came back to Sheffield and found St Mark's, largely through Mark Carey and the fact he took us out for a beer, and that was it. We were secured for 20 years. That takes me to the next point. We found a place to live down in Ecclesfield, having sought long and hard around Grenoside, but every door seemed to shut in our face. In 2002, Helen fell pregnant, and following a healthy 12-week scan, we told the world of our joy. And then at around 16 weeks, we lost that little bundle of joy. Where was God's love? I questioned where God was. I was angry. I was in a dark place. I felt no love. But then, in the wrestling for sense of God's love, his love became very real. Not because we had the twins, no, because we came to a point of knowing that if our family was to stay 2, that would be okay, that God would still bless us. I let my disappointment in not having something that I assumed to be my right to be a barrier in knowing God's transforming love. How many things do we consider to be our right? Well, maybe worldly things. And when we don't get them, we put a barrier up to God's love. Matthew 6, don't store up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moths and vermin destroy, where thieves break in and steal, but store for yourselves treasures in heaven, where moths and vermin do not destroy, and where thieves do not break in. For where your treasure is, there will also be your heart. A quick photo to lighten things up slightly, one of my favourite photos. Laughing away. I think it took about 4 days to prise those little babies out of Sandra and Jill's arms. I think they got a little bit smelly by that stage. The twins, that is, not Sandra and John. 2 years later, we did have the twins, followed by Maddie, and this was one of my favourite photos. So, to point 3, in 2007, my brother's wife Emma was diagnosed with cancer, and in October 2008 she died. This was my first experience of death, that real gut-wrenching hurt. Where was my God? How could he let this happen? In my searching for answers, I felt distant from his transforming love. There were plenty of glib comments, often from Christians, along the lines of, God intended it to happen, or it was all for a purpose. But I put a barrier up to God's transforming love. I couldn't justify in my immature worldly brain why God would let such a thing happen. I wonder if when we hit those rubbish times in life, those life events, whether we put barriers up to God's transforming love. I know that I did. The 4th point is interesting, as my happiness dropped whilst my sense of God's love increased. Many people talk of a midlife crisis. Well, this was certainly mine. Kids, a loving wife, a good job, and my health. What more could I want? I was wrestling with my identity. Who was I? Surely there was more to life than this. In Richard Raw's Falling Upwards, he describes 2 halves of life. The first, where we're naturally and understandably preoccupied with establishing our identities, climbing, achieving, performing. But those concerns will not just serve us as we grow older and begin to embark on further journey, one that involves challenges, mistakes, loss of control. Eventually, we need to see ourselves in a different, more life-giving way. Now, I'm not sure I agree with everything that Richard Raw presents, but one thing he does do, which is why I read so much of his work, is that it makes me pause, become curious, and really centre on what's important, what's really important. Around that time, I fought my own personal battles, but fortunately I found a wise person who accompanied me for a few years and really helped me to hold a mirror up and see for the first time the things that were preventing me from truly knowing God's transforming love. Now, I would be foolish and naive to say that those challenges don't still present themselves, but I genuinely believe that I face them now with an identity born in Christ, not by any worldly affirmation, no accolade, no titles, no position of power, but simply a child of God. In more recent years, I've journeyed with people who may be going through dark times themselves. And there's a common thread that I suggest may hold each one of us back from really knowing that transforming love. We so often hold on to our worldly identities. What people think of me, the size of my house, the car I drive, the job I have, whether I'm seen to be going to church on Sundays. I want to conclude this morning by sharing a slide that I first saw in those midlife crisis years, the cycle of grief and the cycle of grace. You might not see the words in the small print, but in essence, the cycle of grief says this. You start by achieving something, and then you seek affirmation and acceptance by the world. And then that fades away, and you do more. You try harder, and so the cycle carries on. And it's futile. Your acceptance is merely a blink of an eye. A comment that somebody might make that keeps holding you there in that sense of temporary acceptance, and then it goes, and you have to try harder. But if we look at the next slide and we truly grasp what it is to be accepted, that Ephesians 2, acceptance because of God's grace, then the world changes. Because actually you start from a point of acceptance, because God made you. And he is desperate to show you that transforming love. So I suggest the most common barrier to us fully knowing that love is potentially because we don't love ourselves. We seek feeble and temporary affirmation, which might make us feel good for a moment, but then in a flash it's gone. So in a moment we're going to have a time of prayer before we end our time together this morning. I hope that there's something in this morning that will enable you to pause and become curious. Ultimately something that will help you to unblock what might be a barrier for you in truly knowing that transforming love of God. Remember, God loved Saul, but he transformed him through his love to become the man Paul, the man he created him to be. But Saul had to make a decision to get up, to go to the city to find Ananias. And he responded, and then those potter's hands were able to get to work. So let us pray. Father God, you know our every being, our every thought before we think them, our need before we know them. And you patiently wait for us to simply say, take and do with me as you had in mind when you fearfully and wonderfully created me. Help us to shape and form our identities on you and not the ways of the world. And forgive us when we focus on things of the world and not on you. We pray for those we know who are going through dark times, that you will comfort them and bring them peace. We pray that they'll know your transforming love. We bring to mind, in a moment's silence, those people we know personally who need that love right now. And so we conclude our prayers by saying together the words he taught us to pray, the Lord's Prayer. Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come, your will be done, on earth as in heaven. Give us today our daily bread. Forgive us our sins, as we forgive those who sin against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For the kingdom, the power, and the glory are yours, now and forever. Amen. Amen. So as with last week, there are some envelopes at the back for you to take with week 2 on. Bear in mind that my intention about the approach that I'm taking with this mini learning and sharing series is that our time together is simply a starter, an aperitif if you like. What you decide to do in the week ahead is the real time where transformation will take place, where you can dig deeper and learn more about that love that God has for each of us. So I'd encourage you to take one of those envelopes. If you weren't here last week, there's a few from week 1 too. And looking forward to next Sunday, which is the conclusion of this mini-series, where we're considering how we show this transforming love to the world, how we show this transforming love to our brothers and sisters and our communities, how we are a vessel for God's love to flow into a broken world, So this is where the real challenge and opportunity to put into practice some of what we might have been curious and learnt about together can start. I'd love to incorporate in next week's stories a snapshot of your timelines. Maybe your testimony or a point at which you felt close or far from God. This is a safe space. If we can't share things between brothers and sisters in Christ, how do we show it to the world? So I'd encourage you during the course of this week that if you feel God prompting you to share something, to call me or email me, and we'll make that happen in a safe way. But let's think about how we translate that love into something that we can share and tell the world about. So we're going to end this morning with another poem, and I'm going to ask Helen to come up and read another one of her poems, as with last week. And it felt a very apt poem that links very much into some of what I've been saying this morning. And then I will conclude with a blessing. So.
My version of Psalm 139. O Lord, you have seen every bit of me, from my deepest thoughts to my singing in the streets. You know me. You have held me close, held me up, held me together. How amazing that you should do this for me. Can you let go of me? Can you stay away? At times I've felt so far flung, or as if wallowing in the depths. But even then, you've been there, constant, holding me fast. In the early morning anxiety, in the darkness of the night of the soul, you are there. You bring light. For you made me as I am, and how you love your creation. You saw my every step, my every knock, my every laugh, my every tear. You saw all of me and said, how wonderful. And even now, when the future stretches out, you know all that is yet to come. You know that, whatever will be, all will be well.
Thank you, Helen. So, in a moment, we're going to stand and share in the closing prayer together. But just a reminder for next week, if you could text the number if you plan on coming so that we can arrange the layout accordingly. And as I've already said, please, if there's something that you are finding from this morning that you want prayer for, just stay where you are and one of the ministry team will come and pray for you. At the end of next week's service, the ministry team will be intentionally waiting around to offer prayer to you individually. But that prayer is always available, and just want you to be free to seek that wherever you may be. So let's have the last slide, and maybe let's all stand and get that blood circulating again. Hopefully that's large enough text to be able to read. So let's say this closing prayer together. God, you are everything to us, giving us life, filling us with love, and setting us free from sin, that we might live in you. accept the work of our hands this day. Take our lives, give us your peace, and renew us in the service of Jesus Christ, our Lord. Amen. Go in peace to love and serve the Lord. Amen.